everyone, welcome back to the pair. This is not GT. No, this is a preview for round 4. We're obviously talking Port Adelaide versus St Kilda this Sunday at the Adelaide Oval, 2:50 p.m. It's going to be a very enticing, very exciting game of footy. One, because we're wearing that Guernsey over there, and two, well, it's the Gent Cup. But no, it's a game for Port Adelaide to bounce back, and obviously this will be a little bit more of an exclusive preview, which is already ringing notifications off the charts at the moment. But I present to you my co-host from the Glass Table and St Kilda fanatic / St Kilda worker, I shall say, Mr. Jarryd Thomas. Jarryd, welcome to the pair and the preview this week.
Thank you very much for having me. I know, like you said, it feels weird doing this and it's not being GT. Like we were just saying, it's hard to swap into the other mode. I actually have to say analytical things. You have to say actual things about football than just who's stupid sexy or whatever. But it's very, very nice to be here. As you said, the notifications are going off because people are excited about this week's game. Pretty big game for both teams, I would say, for a few different reasons. Saints need to prove themselves as a team that's actually might do something this year, and Port need to prove that they're going to be anything, I think. So it's going to be very, very interesting, and I'm just very excited about it.
It's going to be a good game. A couple of key facts going into this one is the fact that you've never won at the Adelaide Oval, which, look, this year's a year to do it, particularly since you've already played Adelaide, are in good form, and playing a Port Adelaide side, well, you don't know who's going to show up with us. So, a game that you can definitely break the streak, and another streak as well is obviously, you've lost 14 out of the last 15 games against us. You haven't won a game against us since 2020 was the last time you beaten us, and that was in COVID, so technically it doesn't count. And the last 5 times Port Adelaide has played St Kilda, for everyone at home as well that's watching this, it's been Port by 2, Port by 10, Port by 7, Port by 1, Port by 13. And that stems back further before as well. And we know we're the kings of close games. So I like to think of it, Jarryd, as Port Adelaide versus St Kilda is a very, very close yet very ugly rivalry. And it's not a rivalry that's ugly in the sense that you see fights on the field. No, it's more the fact that they're just terrible games of football.
The quality of football that gets produced in Port versus Saints games is definitely nothing to behold. I feel like I've been to almost every Port versus St Kilda game in the last 4 years.
Except for Cairns.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple I haven't been to, and the ones that I haven't been to have been ugly affairs. There was obviously early last year Port Saints at the Adelaide Oval, which was ugly. I believe you were at a wedding that day too, and I was in Vegas, so we missed that, and that was a bad watch. There was obviously Cairns, which no one needs to talk about Cairns ever. It's one of the worst games of football that's ever been put to film. And then all the ones that have been at Marvel, I've been at. And like you said, it's been close, but it's those close games where we've never really felt like we were in it, because I'm watching the game and I'm like, man, we don't deserve to win this. It's just bad games of footy. And we've always seen Port at Marvel had a really good time, and this Port at Marvel streak that was happening up until obviously last week was really good and really appealing, but it was also, you have to remember, a lot of those games came against St Kilda, so it was bizarre, and like you said, ugly. A lot of ugly games, no matter if it's in Cairns in a cyclone or under the roof at Marvel in the test tube. Bad games of footy, and I'm almost certain this week's going to be no different, so really looking forward to it.
And you forget the one as well that we played in China in 2019 as well, which was one of the biggest defeats you had against us. But yeah, it's an interesting one because you come off a good win against Richmond, coming off an even better win against the Cats, both of them at Marvel, and obviously lost to the Crows at the Adelaide Oval. So coming into this one, you feel fairly confident against a Port outfit who lost Essendon in. This game could rival what was the worst game of football last week against the Bombers at Marvel. Obviously beat the Tigers and a pumping loss to Collingwood in round 1. So your initial thoughts going into this, how confident are you? Because as a Port fan, I'm sitting here going, we could be playing Richmond again this week and I'd be feeling the same. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's interesting because, of the 2 wins, I think the sentiment coming out of the Geelong one's obviously really, really high. Geelong's a really strong team that or might be. Again, it's still round 4, so we don't know yet. But we're very highly regarded as a very strong team, and coming out of the Richmond one, obviously it was great to have such a massive win, and I think it's really good for the confidence. Our biggest win in 10 years, one of our highest scores in similar time frame. So having that kind of confidence is really, really good. Not just the opposition base, but just having that in the bank, being like, that's a really good sort of start to the year. So less about the opponent, more about how we actually played. Like our second half last week was fantastic, no matter who you were playing, kind of thing. But the games kind of cancel each other out in terms of we thumped Richmond and Port thumped Richmond, and we both did it at our home grounds. Big fan, big crowd in attendance kind of thing. So pushing them along. So basically, you could almost say like the Port versus Richmond game and the Saints versus Richmond game, you can just put a big cross through both and be like, that doesn't matter coming into this.
Fantastic. We haven't won a game yet.
Because it's just how it is. So look, like I'm not often confident heading into the Adelaide Oval at all, and I have severe PTSD from literally 2 weeks ago when I was there and had to watch that performance. But this week is, if there's ever going to be a chance we're going to do it, it's a chance. But then I know, and I've said this for probably the last 3 years on our podcast, and I've said this for as long as I've known Port Adelaide. If there is one thing that Ken Hinkley and Port Adelaide are going to do, it is bounce back after a humiliating defeat. And the Collingwood game's a great example of that. You then went out and thumped the Tigers, and you've had a loss against Essendon in, like you said, one of the worst games of all time. There is every chance that Ken puts a rocket up in this week, and home crowd, middle of the day on a Sunday, should be pretty big crowd regardless. And yeah, there's every chance you thump us.
I think the one thing about us, and I know the confidence of Port Adelaide fans are quite low at the moment, but I think going into this one, I look at it and go, all right, 10-day break. There's a bit of incentive behind this. We're in that Guernsey, which has quite a bit of success. There's obviously not a lot of success that comes with it as well, and a lot of fans will resonate with that. I think the last time we wore that was actually, I can't remember if it was the last game of 2006 we got thumped by Freo, or it was in fact the one that Daniel Motlop missed down at York Park at the time against the Saints. So there's a lot of
there's a range.
There's no middle ground, and that's been Port Adelaide now. So there's a lot of incentive, I think, for this week. The one key factor, as what I mentioned just then, is the 10-day break, because we were bashed up and bruised, had a lot of injuries, and coming into this one, I look at it and I go, right, you're obviously going to probably be one or two drop out of this one, but there is a key player that is very much humming along on training. Match sim, completing everything, ticking all the boxes. It's Zach Butters. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but Zach Butters coming into this side will instantly increase our motivation capacity. And I don't care, regardless of who we played this week, whether it was St Kilda, it could be Collingwood again, could be anyone. The motivation and like the energy would be a lot different. So Butters plays this week. How do you feel? Does that change your dynamic, your generic, or?
It'll be really interesting to see. Last year at Marvel, Butters was really, really good. He and St Kilda have notoriously had a lot of trouble containing explosive midfielders. The likes of Christian Petrarca always played really well against us. Zach Butters, like I said, played really well against us. Horn Francis also does the same thing. So we notoriously have trouble with that. Obviously, Zach Butters, if he plays, while he has been humming along, he probably still won't be 100%, at least match fitness wise, he won't be 100%. So it is really interesting. It becomes a question of what our midfield then looks like. So Jack Steele's a test this week. He obviously missed last week. It was a very, very late out, 15 minutes before the bounce laid out last week. And you sort of look at it and you take Steele out of that midfield. Obviously, Jack McRae's in there, who has put together an unbelievable season so far. But then you look around him and you go, Hugo Garcia, second year of footy. These players that then rotate in and out of the midfield that you don't know. Toby Travalia had a bit of time in there last week. Jack Sinclair isn't a born midfielder, but he goes in there. Marcus Winte usually tags. So if Butters comes in and Steele doesn't play, that's a massive, massive, depth and disparity between the two teams, and makes it really hard. Windhager sure might be able to tag a Rosie or a Butters or a Horn Francis, but that leaves the other two. So it's interesting. If Butters plays, even at like 80%, if Butters plays, it throws a big spanner in the works of the Saints, I think. Because his presence out there is not just him talent wise, it's also just bringing everyone with him. So it'll be really interesting. I think if we have a full strength midfield, it'll be really interesting to see. And I don't know if Port's going to, they might worry a little bit about playing Butters early. Like we've seen some pretty horror stories of players coming back before they're properly ready. And you do want to get him back. Obviously, you want to kind of get off the canvas, get off the ropes, but I just don't know if this is the time for it, or if it's waiting a week to play Hawthorn, who are flying along, and letting Butters be that 100%.
I think the argument there, and I do agree with you because I don't like. I know our history with it goes right. Instantly, you go back to Connor Rosie last year, and he was underdone, not fit, missed a couple of weeks again, and it was just turmoil. So I know the injury is a bit different, and I know if Butters is training 100%, his recovery is all good when it comes out of match simulation. I give it the tick of approval to play. I also say if you play this week and you're not 100%, but if he's 90% and he gets through, I know there's a lot of if buts and maybes, but if he gets through, then he's 100% ready for Hawthorn, which is another 7-day break. So I think they'll keep that in mind. But a lot of Port fans will sit here and go, don't do it, don't do it. And I'm probably one of those because I'm sitting there going, I still think we have a good enough side to win regardless. I think there's a lot more problems than thinking about bringing in Zach Butters at the moment. The one thing I can expect from Port this week, and I think a lot of fans should take the positive approach with it, is I expect, and you mentioned it before, the bounce back of Port Adelaide. The key factor of this is normally the bounce back comes from the second tier of players and the ones that go missing in the big moments. The big moments last week were missed by Connor Rosie, Horn Francis, Rioli, these types of players that stand up. So I expect a big performance from them. And if the leadership is growing, then you're going to have players like Bergwijn continuing their form. Farrell's going to lift into another gear. Bergman's obviously been sensational throughout the whole time. He'll continue to do his thing. And it just changes the dynamic. But yeah, there's no motivation this week, then I got no hope for anything else. I'll be honest. Do you expect any changes on? I know you said Steele, but if he's obviously a test, do you expect any changes otherwise?
We had I don't know if you had a look at our injury update. It's one of the funniest injury updates of all time because there's like 6 people that have tests next to their name. It's very funny to look at. It'll be interesting to see. We have a few players sort of in and around selection. Obviously, Liam O'Connell goes out because of the concussion suffered during the game. It's like a straight swap though, because Liam Stocker, who was concussed the week before, comes pretty much straight back in. I'm going to assume anyway. Like that's a pretty like for like. They're both gritty, smaller defenders. Even though Liam Stocker's even though O'Connell's like 191 centimeters, but they can be that sort of medium sized defender. So that's pretty much a like for like. It'll be really interesting to see if Steele gets up. He, obviously having a laid out like that, they sort of managed to come back in. You've seen the likes of Tom Stewart sort of coming back in. So if Steele doesn't get up, you can probably sense that most of the guys will sort of say the same. If Steele comes back in, it's relatively simple. I think the only real genuine change will be, Stocker coming in for O'Connell. And you got players like Dan Butler, who is ready to come back this week. But you look at the players in our forward line, and honestly, to be honest with you, our forward line is kind of humming right now. And it's kind of the one thing that's, you look at it and you go, they're humming along nicely. Cooper Sharma Kendall last week kicked 2. Mitch Owens kicked 4 last week. Jack Higgins is 3rd in the Coleman, which is great. And then Lance Collard, who has prior to this year played 4 games. He has come back in for 2 and has been awesome. Has been really high pressure, kicking a couple goals a game and been fantastic. So it's hard to find a spot for Butler back in the team straight away. It might be a VFL sort of job for him. So if the Saints made that change because Butler's part of the leadership group, then that's maybe one. But I don't think they'd drop Collard. It could be a dropping of Keeler, which then makes us maybe too small. So who knows, to be honest. I think, the only one that I think you'd obviously put the absolute stamp on would be probably Stocker coming back in. But everything else is very up in the air.
I think even your tools, and we did it against Richmond. Even your tools down forward aren't the biggest of brutes. I know Marshall can float down there when he's resting, and he's the key factor this week. Jordan Sweet versus Rowan Marshall was a massive matchup, and that's the key pillar again. If Butters comes in, that influences the contest a lot more, and so forth. But defensively, we probably struck actually not too bad. You don't have a Sam Draper kicking sideways or. Tim Membry's not part of your side anymore. You can dominate us against Collingwood. So yeah, I think it works. Probably benefits us regardless if you go small or tall, because I don't think you have. Well, I say that not confidently, but I don't think you don't have that big. You don't have the Max King.
Mitch Owens plays sort of taller and bigger than he is. Like, he runs through a lot of guys, and he's very strong, but he's not that physical presence where you look at him running at you. He's not for lack of a better example, he's not a Charlie Dixon where he walks in and you're like, God damn. Like, even if he's not playing that well, you look at Charlie Dixon, you're like, that guy's going to eat me. But he's not like a guy. You don't look at Mitch Owens and go, that guy's going to eat me. He plays stronger than he is, and he plays bigger than he is, but he's not that, Fraser Garrick style, storming out the goal square kind of player.
Do you know, I sit here and I go, do you know what's an aesthetically pleasing matchup? And we say not big, not strong, but he's very physical, and he's, physically looks appealing, and he's fit. Machito Owens versus Miles Bergman is just like a matchup made for, like, if you're a lineup enthusiast and you look at the website and you go, right, Bergman versus Owens, and you can picture them, how they look. It's just aesthetically pleasing.
I tell you what, right? You know what's even more aesthetically pleasing than that? It's going to be really aesthetically pleasing when they're both in training jumpers against each other at Morale start of 2026. When they're training side by side every week.
It'll look really appeasing, absolutely, especially when Nasai Valera is lining up with Jace Bergwijn together.
I knew how that was coming.
Yeah. Many bullets here. You got Dougal Howard still, so keep that in mind. This is the Dougal Howard Cup. Playing oh, yes. Logan Austin. Who else has been Saints Port?
There'd be a few that I'm trying to think of right now.
Wow, it's too hard to tell.
Yeah.
People in the comments will be like, "Oh, well, you're forgetting this bloke. You're forgetting
Riley Bonner. Riley Bonner, obviously.
I wonder I forgot him. So sorry, Riley. Sunday's going to be 23 with a chance of a shower. Likely in the afternoon and evening, which means this might be starting sunny, but it'll end up being wet, which means you get your standard typical 70 to 60 scoreline that we've been so used to. And I mentioned to you this off air before. No team has scored over 100 points since like 2019, and that was in China. So technically, no one scored over 100 points in Australia for like 10 years. Give us your final pitch, your final word, and then obviously a tip as well. What's going to happen this week, and how do you think it will pan out, and who's going to win?
This would be really interesting. This is going to be, like I said sort of earlier, this is a real test of two different teams. Saints need to – this is the one that, like, if they are going to be sort of that team that they need to be, and people are like, oh, maybe they're going to be all right, this has to be a game you win. If you come out of a thumping, like you thump Richmond and then you lose to Port, it's kind of one where you go, all right, yes, it was the Adelaide Oval, so like, you might have been expected to lose, but if you need to claim scalps on your way to playing finals. Like, you need to win a game that you might not be expected to. And we've had one against Geelong, but this is one. Adelaide Oval, it's going to be a big crowd. Like I said, the record's against us. There's things going wrong, but if there's ever going to be a team that's going to be able to kick a few goals out of all the Saints teams over the last 5 years or so, this team seems to be the one. We've scored in their 70s, we scored 98 and we scored 135 last week. We actually have proven to be able to kick a few goals this year, which is something that I think in games like this, and like without sounding too just like the most obvious person in the world, you just got to kick goals. Like, it's one of those ones where we can't just sit back and defend and absorb Port pressure, because the Port pressure won't let up, especially a week after a really poor game against Essendon. So it's going to be very interesting. I think it could be quite scrappy, like you said. Hopefully, if the rain stays away, it might be all right. But be really interesting. And both teams have, a lot to play for. Port probably more so, but both teams have a hell of a lot to play for.
Very more. I think this game is one of the more important round 4 clashes.
Either team's had a while.
Yeah, like, it's a chance for you to go 3-1, and then you come to Adelaide and gather around. You play a Giants outfit, which in Adelaide, that's they're not gettable. That's a
Norwood. Who knows? Anything can happen at Norwood.
Well, you know how to play Norwood, don't you? And then obviously we'll be 1-3 going in against Hawthorn. But if I'm sitting here and I'm going, if there's ever a time that I just am confident enough to say that we'll just stand up and win, it's this. If we don't win this game, that confident. Well, I don't know how to describe it, but it's that safe spot of knowing that this team will respond and will get going. That's sort of broken, and it's
Fades away
like
a little bit.
it's the spirit. It's the spirit of all right. You can come back from this. You can bounce back. If you can't bounce back from last week, having a 10-day break with the incentive of that, and possibly getting your vice captain back in your side, then I think there's a lot more problems going on at Port Adelaide than we think. But I'm confident enough to say that I think there's a winning score still here. We've still kicked, and like you say, you've scored higher scoring affairs. We've still kept Essendon, below the 80 mark. We kept Richmond below 70. I think, we kept them below 70. We've also kicked, a decent score. So I don't say this confidently. I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm going to tip Port Adelaide by 13. Jarryd?
Nice. I am going to go with St Kilda by 9. I think it's close, but I think, like I said, I never walk into Adelaide with any confidence, and this just may be the. I feel like I'm a very optimistic Saints fan. There's a lot of not ones. There's a lot of real pessimistic Saints fans, but I feel like I'm pretty optimistic. And I go Saints by 9.
You got a best on ground for me?
Best on ground. I mean, it's a very easy pick, but it's someone that has been our shining star in the first few weeks, and it's been Jack Macrae. If we're going to win this game, it needs to be one of the midfield. It needs to be dominating the likes of Rosie and Butters if he plays. So Jack Macrae does what he does the first couple of weeks, has 35 and 25 of those contested. I think we win this game. So Jack Macrae for me.
I like that. I do like the matchup of Jack Macrae versus Willem Drew. That's another aesthetically pleasing matchup. Like they're both not quick. They're both not like super agile, but they just get in there. They do the job. They've got similar pace, and it's going to be pleasing when Willem Drew has, he only had 4 tackles last week and missed a few, and this week he sticks them all. And Jack Macrae ends up with 20 touches and ruins everyone's fantasy dreams.
I swear Jack Macrae this year is like everyone as soon as after round 1 happened, it was like, oh boy, get him in. Somebody get that man in.
I reckon a lot of people just had him in because they were like, finally, he gets an opportunity to breathe.
Gonna play midfield. Yeah, I know. Crazy.
I'm going to have Jason Horne-Francis as my best on ground. There isn't... I want to see the maturity in the kids stand up here and be like, right, you've copped...
Yeah.
Even your loving father of the media, Kane Corns, has said you had a shit week last week. There's a chance here to stand up and say, you're not gonna cop that. This is the maturity phase for Horne-Francis, and I'm tipping that to occur. Who's your first goal?
First goal. See, we notoriously don't get off to fast starts, and I feel like maybe similar again here. So I'm very tempted to pick a Port player for this one. And I watched now. Admittedly, I put myself through the horror that was Port versus Essendon, and someone that I thought was absolutely fantastic, especially early on, was Mitch Georgiades, and I think it's a safe bet to pick him. I think it's going to be a sort of catch off guard situation. I think we're not going to put as much time into him than we should, and I think Georgiades will get off to a hot start like he did last week, and I'm going to tip him for the first goal.
I like Pau Pepper.
Yep.
I think that'll be just that typical. He'll just pop up out of nowhere. He likes playing against. Well, he likes just playing at the Adelaide Oval. Really, he doesn't like playing outside, but he's a nice home ground operator.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, he's going to have a bit of extra incentive. It was us against us last year that he did ACL. Against us last year that he
did too.
Extra incentive for him to come out and have a good game. And on Horne-Francis as well, I was looking at my Supercoach team today, and I looked at his averages. I was like, man, you're this close. I was like, I'm going to give you one more game. I'm going to give him one more game, and if he has what he has, I'll get rid of him. But I'm on your train here. I'm going to go, you know what? He has to bounce back. He's got to do it some way, and he always plays well against St Kilda. So I'll back him in.
Never ever doubt Jason Horne-Francis. And you know what? When push comes to shove, if you need some help, throw in a 37-year-old into the midfield and see how it goes.
Sure to go fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the preview this week. It's going to be an enticing game. I look forward to being there. You'll be there as well, working along. And you're 0-1 at the Adelaide Oval when working, so we'll keep the streak going. And
I'm 0-2 watching St Kilda flat at the Adelaide Oval, so be fun.
0-3 this week. I look forward to it. But Jarryd, thank you very much for joining me this week on the preview. Any last words, final words, anything to say?
I mean, nothing really. Obviously, good game. As you said, I will be there, so that's going to be very, very fun. I'm very excited for Never Tear Us Apart. It's my favorite thing of every port game, so I'm very keen for that. And yeah, just keen to be there, and hopefully we have a not Cairns game.
Yeah, well, if you get Cairns and we win again, then I'll be satisfied.
I
I
will
will
not.
be satisfied this time. It's got similar vibes. I remember going up to Cairns. It was 1-5 we were, and we ended up beating the St Kilda outfit. I think with 4-2. So
Checks out. Yep.
might go watch the Robbie Gray behind once again. But no, thank you everyone for watching. Make sure you subscribe for plenty more port and AFL content. Check out the glass table that came out earlier in the week as well. You'll see the same faces doing the same, and everything's the same. So happy days. We'll see you in the next one. Hopefully the port win.
Bye, everybody.
Can't the pair.